Okay, thank you for your interest in my teaching tip. Let's get started on correcting learner errors with humor and some practical applications in the classroom. Okay, so first of all, I want to reiterate why it is important to continue to talk about and research oral corrective feedback, by which we mean teacher and peer responses to learners' erroneous second language production, right? Studies have found time and again that oral corrective feedback is a beneficial strategy to help with second language acquisition in the classroom. Like meta studies or individual studies have all found almost exclusively that OCF helps with second language acquisition. So that's why we are trying to find the best way to provide feedback to learners, um, but we're not there yet. So um, my teaching tip today is about using humor and laughter during oral corrective feedback, right? But essentially, these are pragmatic concepts that we're talking about since we're going outside of the purview of grammar and phonology and semantics. Like, really, these are pragmatic concepts, and they don't come alone, especially when it comes to smiling and humor as pragmatic concepts. They're closely tied to the concept of face mitigation and politeness. So the concept of face, the term face has made it into our mainstream vocabulary. So it is the same in the field as it is in how we would use it in daily life, like losing face, right? So our public image that we want to protect. And in the classroom, when we correct our learners' errors, when we provide them negative feedback on their errors, essentially we're threatening their face because we're telling them that they're wrong or they performed subpar, less than expected, you know? So OCF is then, and it's an accepted fact that OCF is inherently a face-threatening act, right? And then we'll tie this to humor and smiling soon. But then we're in human communication, where there is face-threatening acts, there is mitigation, right? So our efforts at reducing the negative effects of a face-threatening act, because we can't, I mean, the term sounds like something we should avoid. Like if it's a face-threatening act, then don't commit it, right? But it doesn't work that way. Constantly in our lives, we have to do things that may threaten our own face or our interlocutors' faces. And what we do is we do them anyway, but we just try to mitigate depending on how much we care about the person and the relationship. And we care about our students, right? And there's, as you will see, there's a lot of mitigation in the classroom as well. And these concepts are actually part of politeness, right? How like oral corrective feedback is kind of against the rules of politeness, right? And in all of the classical linguistic theories of politeness that you see here cited, like it says to be polite, don't impose, give options, make hearer feel good, be friendly. Like when you tell someone they're wrong, chances are you're not making them feel good, right? So that's how we're saying OCF goes against the rules of politeness. Or for the teacher, we have our positive face, which is the desire to be well regarded or even admired. So there's that consideration, whereas the students have their negative phase, their desire to be left alone and to act as they please. And when we interfere with our feedback, we kind of go against that. So all of this to say, smiling and humor can actually be ways to mitigate face-threatening acts, and in our case, oral corrective feedback in the classroom that the teachers provide to their language learners. So felt smiles are known to cause positive affect in the addressees. Unfelt smiles are considered to be just polite smiles or social smiles rather than evoking positive affect in the hearers. And then teachers actually have been documented to use smiling to manage sensitive actions as well as miscommunication in the classroom. Then humor, also a tight concept and our main focus, is a well-known form of mitigation, and it's an immediacy behavior that reduces learner anxiety, and it may be used by teachers to weaken the face-threatening properties of oral corrective feedback, right? We can see how all of these pragmatic concepts come together in an intricate web of moves that we employ in our in our efforts to correct our language learners' linguistic errors. Okay, so the teaching tips that I'm presenting today come from two data sets. And first, let me tell you about the study methods that I used. So basically, I have two data sets, which are video recordings of intact language classrooms. So then the oral corrective feedback sequences in these classrooms were identified using the Lister and Ranta framework from 1997. And then to identify the smiles and to determine whether they're genuine smiles or polite smiles, the facial action coding system was used. I'm a certified fax coder. And then the general theory of verbal humor, along with other contextualization cues, was used to identify the instances of humor. Then, to make sure that I am not mistakenly calling instances of humor and smiling that may be like Schadenfreude, you know, I also looked at the existence of other types of mitigation. So for that, I used Caffey's framework. I used Elan annotation and description tool. I'll show you a screenshot of what it looked like for the multimodal analysis. And for everything I did, there was iterative reliability testing to make sure that I wasn't, you know, going off the hook and just making things up. So okay, so the first data set is approximately 16 hours of intact classroom data where the students and teachers are interacting with each other. And in this data set, there are 3 intact classes taught by 7 teachers. It's an intensive English program at a private language school in Turkey, where there were adult learners of English as a foreign language, EFL, who were at intermediate competency level. And then the second data set that's currently being transcribed and annotated is approximately 30 hours of intact classroom data, 10 different classes, 10 different groups of people taught by 3 different instructors in a modern languages program at the Midwestern University in the United States. Learners are college students, so adults, adult learners of L2 French and L2 Spanish. And for this data set, there is beginner to intermediate competency levels for both of the languages. Like I said, this data set is not completely transcribed and annotated. It is completely transcribed, but not completely annotated yet. But there's still interesting things that play into this teaching tip presentation, so I've brought it in. Okay, so I've been talking about the OCF sequence, right? What do I mean when I say the OCF sequence? The OCF sequence starts with a learner error, right? They may use their first language, they may use the wrong gender if it's a gendered language, it can be a grammatical error, a lexical error, etc., etc. So usually learner errors, well, not always, definitely not always, but Learner errors then receive feedback from the teacher, which come in different types, right? And then after the teacher feedback, our wish and hope is that there's going to be learner uptake, meaning there will be in the turn that immediately follows the teacher's feedback, there will be some sort of acknowledgement, either commenting on the teacher feedback or trying to correct the error that the student made. So we call that uptake, and we call that successful uptake if the error was actually fixed. And we call it unsuccessful uptake if it still needs repair. Like even partial repair doesn't count as a successful uptake. And then, there may or may not be reinforcement by the teacher, like good job, well done, or they may move straight into topic continuation. So either the student or the teacher just continues with what they were doing before. Now, why do we care about this sequence? We care because we have a way to quantify whether the teacher's feedback instance was successful or unsuccessful, right? And if we look at the learner uptake turn, and if we find that there is repair in that uptake turn, that is one way to operationalize OCF, oral corrective feedback effectiveness. If there is repair in the next turn, then we can successfully say teacher feedback was successful. Then we can categorize the feedback, we can annotate, facial expressions, nonverbal behavior, types of feedback, things the feedback addressed, like phonetics, phonology, or syntax, right? So this is why it's important. And this is what the annotation tool, transcription and annotation tool I used looks like. It's called Ilan. So you have the videos. For the first data set, I had the teachers from the back left corner facing the teacher and back right corner facing the teacher. So you can then synchronize the two videos, or however many, and the audio. And then you have your tiers right here. And then you can like click on each tier in the time frame that it happens during, and then just double click and write what needs to be happening. Okay. So what have I found so far? First of all, smiling and mitigation are definitely connected. I'm not going to go into the details of the mitigation, but remember, I was looking at other forms of mitigation to make sure the smiling wasn't evil, like, haha, you're wrong. For scientific purposes, I needed to make sure that that wasn't happening and that smiles were actually like not that, right? So I found that these mitigators were significantly co-occurring with smiling. So then the smiling was not aggressive, it wasn't Schadenfreude, that is covered. So I further found that every single OCF instance was mitigated in the data, verbally or non-verbally. If not in the feedback turn, then in a following turn for sure. And then I found that smiling can be the sole mitigator. So far from this study, we can see as part of our teaching tip that if you feel bad about the correction you're making, or you don't know how to say it in a way that's not offensive to the student, then smiling can be a way for you to show that you don't mean to offend them or alienate them or berate them when you correct a student. Then I was also wondering because there's research in the field that shows there's a difference between genuine smiles and polite smiles in terms of what it invokes in the hearer, right? So I looked at that, and apparently, whether you smile or don't doesn't make a difference. in terms of OCF effectiveness, whether there's uptake versus whether there's successful uptake on the learner's part, unless it is a genuine smile. Then my data here shows that genuine smiles are significantly correlated with successful learner uptake. So that further proves that it's further empirical evidence that smiling should be a part of OCF conversations in second language acquisition studies. So once I was done with studying the smiling and mitigation part, I was like, what about humor? So in the first data set, teachers seem to utilize humor as a means of mitigating the face threat, for sure, because just like with smiling, humor also co-occurs with other linguistic mitigation. And there's an instructional humor processing theory out there that states humor can only have a positive impact on learning in the classroom if the student affect is positive, right? But here, my data shows that when teachers are correcting a learner's errors and they're joking at the same time, making a joke, being funny, and there's laughter, a lot of the times what that means is neither the teacher nor the students go back to the original error. Once humor comes into play, all concerns for accuracy seem to go out the window. So it is potentially a choice that the teacher is making, because humor builds rapport, everyone involved, unless you're the butt of the joke, but even then you might enjoy it, right? Everyone enjoys it. And then my data shows that, yes, there is clearly positive affect, right, during humor. But then in terms of feedback effectiveness, the learning goes out the window. Then I looked at the same things in the French data, and I only have the 40 minutes of that. And in the 33 instances of OCF in that 40-minute French class, only 4 OCF instances included smiling. And there was nothing I could test statistically because the numbers were so low, and it didn't look like anything. So remember the first data set I was talking about is in Turkey. It's an EFL environment. Here we have American students studying French here in the US. And the teachers' difference from the other data set was very stark. However, I should note that the L2 French data are not fully comparable to the English data yet, because the proficiency levels and the duration of the data don't match yet because the second data set is still under analysis. But it already tells me from the almost non-existent smiling during the feedback turn that cultural differences may actually play a role. There seems to be considerably more smiling during OCF in the Turkish data compared to the American data. And that is not to say that I have a more serious, more stern-looking French instructor in the second data set. She is all smiles. And I'm going to look at the baseline to actually quantify that instead of going off of my own observation of how she smiles normally. But that was definitely a conscious choice not to smile as she was correcting the students. However, in the reinforcement turn, she was smiling. So it was still part of the OCF sequence, just a different turn compared to the Turkish data. Okay, so all of that to say, teachers should recognize the social emotional effects of teacher feedback in regard to smiling and humor. If you want to smile during feedback, you can, but it doesn't make a difference unless it's a genuine smile. So don't fake it if you want it to be effective. And then humor is also a useful tool in the classroom for sure. But if your focus is on accuracy, then you want to steer clear of using humor because my data shows that you just lose track of the linguistic focus. And then the manner in which a teacher provides verbal or nonverbal feedback may differ from culture to culture. So you're all in an American setting, but remember your students are from all around the world. So their expectations, what they're used to in their classrooms, is going to be different when it comes to oral corrective feedback. So what you can do is be observant of how they react to the ways you correct their errors. And if you have any questions or comments, please contact me at this email address. Thank you for listening to my teaching tip.